So if the muscles are not challenged, we don't challenge the cardiovascular system the same way, right? So I would argue that strength training is more important than cardiovascular training.
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. Today we're speaking with the co-author of 9 best-selling fitness books who has utilized his personal experiences as an athlete and combined them with advanced theories of sports science and the principles of modern strength and conditioning systems. Also joining me in the interview is my co-host, Mr. Pete Holman, an entrepreneur, inventor, product developer, and trainer who is a subject matter expert on the evolution of strength training and the Farm Strong movement. Throughout this interview, we discuss these training philosophies, as well as the reason strength training is both a competitive advantage and a life advantage, why good trainers design workouts and great trainers design programs, and the mistakes that people make when it comes to bodyweight training. So please welcome Mr. Alwyn Cosgrove and Mr. Pete Holman to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. So Mr. Alwyn Cosgrove, please, I'm very pleased to welcome you to the Escape Fitness podcast. I've never done a threesome before, and I've got this good-looking gentleman on the right-hand corner as well, Pete Holman. So I'm just looking forward to our conversation today.
Oh, I'm very glad to have me. Like I said, is everything. This should be a good podcast. Well, you and me will be good. Pete will bring it back.
So I thought I would start. You don't normally get an Englishman and a Scotsman, and I was kind of thinking of a few things to kick off the interview, and I thought, well, does anyone know what an Englishman, an Irishman, an American, and a Scotsman have in common? And it's not one of those Englishman, Irishman, Scotsman jokes.
I don't know.
You don't? Okay. All right. Well, it's relevant to the conversation, but apparently I was when I was reading and looking into it, I was looking into the Highland Games, and what I didn't realise was that the Highland Games actually didn't come from Scotland. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't.
It came from Ireland, but it was quite an interesting story because it came from Ireland, went over to Scotland 2000 BC apparently. And it was the Brits that caused the Highland Games to go to America because apparently they banned the Scottish from wearing Scottish outfit and any sort of cultural stuff. They banned it. And so it ended up going to America. So I thought that was just a little bit of an interesting trivia that I didn't know about. That led on to apparently what was one of the first official strongman competitions. So yeah, it's something that
I'll tell you, it's bigger over here than I think it is in Scotland. I think partly because of weather, right? They'll do ones here. There was one in Long Beach. I had a staff member worked for me who competed in the Highland Games, and we're down in Long Beach, and it's, there's guys in kilts and tank tops, and it's sunny. Like that part doesn't fit, right? The sunniness, but it's big. It's a big event. It's a massive sport over here. Like I'd say bigger than is. I don't want to say bigger than Scotland. Probably somebody's going to get mad. Some fact checker will get mad at me and dispute this on Twitter. But it's very big over here for sure.
Yeah, Pete and I were talking sort of prior to this about Farm Strong, and the reason I ended up looking at the Highland Games was that I didn't realise this either, but it was a very functional event where it was created. I think some of the royalty were involved, but they actually were running competitions based on a lot of the things that these kingsmen or clansmen you used to actually do in their sort of, in their regular jobs. So it was quite interesting that this sort of Farm Strong movement that we were talking about now and some of these original games that went back years had a very sort of functional origin to them.
Yeah, I mean, they still have the pitchfork, the hay bale pitchfork throw as one of the events. Right? And obviously that's where the term farmer's carry came from. Right?
Oh,
that's
really?
the strength part of it, right?
Yeah, I didn't know that. So yeah, Pete and I were chatting, and we were thinking, okay, so where do we sort of focus the conversation on? And one of the things that I think we both kind of agreed was strength and the origins of strength and the importance. I don't know whether you want to jump in, Pete, but I know it's something that you find relevant to a lot of clients you're working with now.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm still very active in personal training, and I'm up in Aspen. I've got an interesting demographic. I've got older folks in their 60s and 70s, which is really neat for me because I use a lot of physical therapy techniques to help mitigate pain and restore function. But one thing I'm noticing across the board is that these folks, they're often very lean. They're not worried about body transformation. They've got great cardio. You know, they hike and bike all summer and they ski in the winter, but their strength is diminishing. And so they want to hit the golf ball further. They can't, they don't have the power and the drive. They want to get off the saddle when they bike. They don't have that strength, that foundational strength. And so I've been doubling down on strength with my older clients, and I've had some great results with it. And I'm curious to know what strength is to you and how it's working in your programming, and what your thoughts are about in regards to being farm strong.
Well, I can touch on that because I've watched my dad just turned 79, and he's not in the best of health. But I can tell you his limitations are not cardiovascular. Like it is a strength limitation, like getting out of a chair or climbing stairs. It's not a lack of an ability to inhale and process oxygen, right? So, and if you think about it, we programmed a lot of stuff backwards. Right? We were wrong with things that we thought that cardiovascular health, it's not unimportant, right? We thought it was the most important thing with the aging population. But when you start understanding what happens, the reason the heart and lungs have a demand put on them, it's because there's activity within the muscles. The muscles are asking for oxygen, right? So the heart beats faster, respiration increases because it's muscle work. So if the muscles are not challenged, we don't challenge the cardiovascular system the same way, right? So I would argue that strength training is more important than cardiovascular training, and would enhance it anyway, with a caveat that perhaps power training, which I'm going to define as moving as fast as possible with control, doesn't have to look fast, just intent, right? Maybe even more important than strength. If you watch on, like, something's often the cause of death, the initial cause of death for someone who's older starts with a fall. They fall at the same speed as younger people. Right, they just can't move their foot fast enough. They can't move their hand fast enough to save themselves. So I would say that in that, with the aging population, power, strength, and then conditioning as lower down. Now for athletes, the reason we don't allow the youth to compete against adults, and we don't allow females to compete against males, and we have weight classes in combat sports and strength sports, is that this idea that, with the assumption that an adult is stronger than a kid, that a male is stronger than a female, that a heavier athlete is stronger than a lighter athlete. And this is all, I'm sure there's exceptions where an elite lightweight female could be stronger than me, but largely this is going to hold true. So we have to say then, I use the phrase strength training is a cheat code, right? It would be illegal if it was a pill, right? But it's completely legal. Like, you could make a lightweight female stronger than a middleweight male if you could, right? And it would be a massive advantage against our competition, right? And this is one of the jokes of martial arts that I've said to Pete, is that you use your opponent's strength against you, right? If that were true, that's the biggest lie in martial arts. If that were true, the heavyweight men's black belt would be at a severe disadvantage against the lightweight ladies' black belt, right? Because his massive strength would get used against him, right? So that phrase doesn't sit. I have this thing: if you're the school bully and you're 250 pounds. And I'm 160 pounds, I'm in trouble because you're just too strong and too big, until I learn how to fight. Now you're in trouble because skill is a big equalizer until you learn how to fight. And then strength is the advantage again. So I think strength training is a competitive advantage and a life advantage. And it's the most, I want to say the simplest to improve, not the easiest. Requires work, but it's not complicated, right? But it is, I think, for aging population, I think it's a huge role in body comp too, and definitely for athletes, that like strength training is a cheat code. That's I should trademark that term.
Where does strength come from? Like, I mean, I'm talking kind of biomechanically, physically. What is it? Where does it come from?
Well, it's basically the nervous, if I'm going to describe it, the nervous system is switching on a contractile mechanism, right, in the form of your muscles, and asking it to produce force over a lever, right? So it starts with the nervous system, which is why like I said, some power work where the intent is to move the as fast as you can. Now, if you have a light implement, it's going to fly, but you could apply that to a heavy implement, right, where it may move slower. But again, it's the nervous system applying like just for the masses, applying a signal to a contractile tissue, the actin myosin. You remember this from your certifications in school, the actin myosin sliding filament theory, right? Two things I remember are actin myosin sliding filament theory and the mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell. They're the two things I remember, right? But this applies it on a lever. So that's the real simple way without getting into it. And then within that, there can be different types of strength, right? If I can bench press 300 pounds, but it takes me 3 seconds, and Pete can bench press 150, but it takes him 0.5 of a second, I'm the stronger bench presser, but if it came to a punch, he's applying 150 pounds in half a second. It would take me, I could only, at 300 pounds and 3, I can only apply 100 in a second, which is 50 in half a second. He's 3 times stronger. His absolute strength is less, but his strength here is much faster. With that, we also have to look at the continuum of strength endurance, which fits in it as, how strong are you later in the game, later in the day, later with the farmer, later in the field carrying the bales of hay, right? So that's so within strength, there can be different components within that, right?
But what you're saying is, regardless, if you don't have strength, it's very hard to produce power.
Yeah, it would be the basis, right? Like in a really kind of raw explanation, power is strength over time, right? Would that work? Like strength with the time component, absolute strength. It's interesting to me. Technically, the sport of powerlifting, these guys display power, but it's not scored on power. They can lift it as slow as they want, right? Like it's a slower guy could win, right? Because it's not technically power, but I mean that's just, it could be called strength lifting would make more sense, right? But yeah, I think strength is the basis for cardio. It's the basis for power, and I think with some range of motion stuff, as you touched on, Pete, perhaps my joint can't go to that range because my body doesn't feel safe in that range because my joint doesn't have the strength to protect me, right? So a lack of strength should show itself as a lack of range of motion.
And furthermore, I'm even noticing this with my older clients, balance. If you don't, for instance, if you do a single leg exercise, which we often find ourselves in a single leg position, whether it's lunging down to grab something, or gosh forbid, if you're skiing and you end up on one ski, if you don't have strength in the hip abductors and the external rotators and all those pelvic stabilizers, you don't have the ability to balance. So now strength is not just about power, it's about balance and even mobility.
Well, if you think about balance too, right? Balance is almost it's a speed component. It's got to adjust, right? It's got to stabilize at speed. Like it's got to kick in the different muscles so that you don't stumble, right? But if you think it's not just your ability to, in our world, it's not just the ability to stand on one leg and not move, right? That might be how we demonstrate it, and it could be how perhaps we train it, but that's not how it works. That balance is an instantaneous thing, right? It's like most of my clients, I've got one American Ninja Warrior who might be doing tightrope walking, things like that we have to work on like extreme stuff. But generally for an athlete, balance is partly change of direction stuff, right? That you're moving one way and you got to completely stabilize, decelerate, and accelerate out the other direction, right? Or with the aging population, if you can stop someone from falling, you're going to save lives. Like I'm serious. Like if you can get someone whose muscles and strength can fire, and that will stop them from falling, which is part of it's balance. Like I can tell you, my dad probably standing on one leg would be fine, but when he goes,
can you do that when you're? Can you develop that? Because I notice as I get older, your reactions do slow down, and I guess that's a natural part of aging. But can you speed that up so that those reactions to prevent a fall or whatever?
Yeah, I believe so. And there's going to be a limitation. Like a 90-year-old man is going to move slower, right? But there's a book from years ago called Younger Next Year, where it said we thought the age decline sort of at 40, 45, 50, and over years you just decline. When you look at biology, It could go 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and then you could fall off a cliff late, right? So you can definitely develop a lot of these things. Is it's the principles of training. Like, I have to overload the system by giving it a stimulus, which creates a response, and over time that creates an adaptation, so that the organism changes, right? The SAID principle, specific adaptation to imposed demand. So you can do it. I think a lot of people feel, oh, you can't train balance, but what if the limitation is a strength imbalance, as Pete was touching on, right? That the stabilizers just aren't strong enough to hold you. Then that's I'd hate saying easy. Simple and easy are not synonyms, right? It's a simple process for us to do, but you're going to have to require a lot of work for it.
Thank you for supporting the Escape Your Limits podcast. If you're thinking about creating a unique and engaging fitness space to take your fitness to the next level, then we have you covered. Escape Fitness design and manufacture some of the most innovative, attractive, and durable functional training and free weight equipment used by many of the best trainers and fitness brands across the globe. As a valued listener, we are offering you a 10% discount off many of the products on our website. You can check out the full range by going to escapefitness.com and use the code dumbbell. That's escapefitness.com using the code dumbbell. That's it for me. Please enjoy the rest of this interview.
Well, and the famous physical therapist Tom Purvis once said, isolation before integration, which is maybe a good segue to my next question for you. But sometimes you have to slow down to speed up. In other words, you might have to isolate the glute medius, some of the hip abductors, before you start doing high to low chops or advanced balance exercises or deceleration drills. So my next question, Alwyn, is when you talk about the kinetic chain and the linkage in this system, you know, it's interesting. Back in the day, I started bodybuilding with Arnold Schwarzenegger's Modern Encyclopedia to bodybuilding. And that was based off a bunch of Joe Weider principles. And back in the 70s and 80s, it was a lot of isolation. You're building up strength. And that was great because you need strength. But at some point, you got to connect the system together and integrate the system. And that's how you become skillful and athletic. And I think that's one of the reasons I became a high-level martial artist, as were you, is we were able to connect the chain from high to low and low to high. Can you speak a little bit about that and the importance of that, energy leaks that Ray Cook talks about and linkage?
Well, there's a quote from Errol Lederman from 1924, and is something like, how does a man expect to possess coordination and strength when his muscles have never worked together in groups? So I had a conversation with Dave Draper, who's just passed away, sadly, a long time ago, through his wife, Larry, that prior to really the sort of anabolic era, bodybuilders did 3 to 4 full body workouts a week, right? And they did an extra workout to bring up a lagging body part. So they did like maybe biceps on one day a week to bring up a lagging body part. Then it was like their special 3 base trainings and their specialized workout. And then what started to happen, and it kind of came along with the advent of steroids, is these guys started to do these body part splits. But I don't make fun of that at all. Their goal was to build a statue, right? Their goal was to build, like, put shoulders on with clay on something, then sculpt away the midsection and make the lats bigger and make the quads bigger. And you look at someone and they're like, he needs bigger shoulders. He can't get a bigger chest. He can't get bigger triceps. It's going to ruin the look. So an isolation exercise works here. That was functional for their goal, right? For an athlete, we have to link the system, right? Now that doesn't mean and I like that, isolate then integrate. If your quad is weak, we may need to take that out of a squat and work on strengthening it. If there's an injury, work on strengthening and isolation before linking it back into a squat or a single leg squat. And I think most coaches and trainers, people listening to this, we understand isolation and compound exercises, right? Isolation would be a dumbbell fly. Compound would be a dumbbell press. Isolation would be perhaps a leg extension, straight leg raise. Compound would be a squat. But beyond that, there's a link, what I got it from Coach Peter Twist, a link system exercise where squat and press, lunge and row, where if you look at the fibers of the lats, they come at an angle, and then you come across the thoracolumbar fascia here, and the glutes line up. They're supposed to work together. Right? That's a sling system that's supposed to work, right? You look at the front, the line across the abs, the pec to the arm, across to the inner thigh. It's supposed to work as a chain. So the artificial isolation of upper and lower, or if you go to, I think is it Body Worlds, the Body Worlds exhibit where they have them.
Yeah.
You look at this. This is like it's like this huge web of things, and you're like pick up. I'm gonna pick up my cup. I couldn't do that with one muscle. There's so many things. And when we talk about like isolation training, you didn't actually isolate the biceps because you used your grip and you used your forearm, right, and your shoulder stabilized it. So, but that's not to suggest these things don't have a place. They can have a place in rehab or early training, and they can have a place for the bodybuilder to change just how something looks, right? If you want to make your bicep bigger in relation to everything else, you have to take everything else out, right? You have to take the limiting factor out, right? So when we do that with some of our core training, like our chops and lifts, we'll start in kneeling or half kneeling to sort of take the lower body out, right? Take the loose positions out and lock down the lower back because the hips are fixed and force the core to work, right? But the goal is to get up and get you, doing a standing chop, right? And integrating into medicine ball throws and things like that, right? So there is a series of what's my limiting factor, and can I isolate it either to take it out or to take it out of the equation completely, or to strengthen it. I had a great conversation with Josh Henkin yesterday. That there's a move we've seen a lot with guys elevating their heels in the squat so they can get deeper, right? So their limitation is ankle mobility. So they're taking that out so they can have their athletes or themselves squat deeper. And what Josh was suggesting is, why don't you just not squat as deep? Right? Like you like, why don't you squat like higher? Why do we choose to take this limitation out so you can squat deeper? Why don't you keep that in and like go as deep as you can? What if your knee didn't have mobility? We just turn a squat into a good morning, right? What's the purpose of taking taking this limiting factor out and ignoring it rather than working on it? So there's a place.
Sorry, I was just going to jump in there. So for people that probably don't want to necessarily be a bodybuilder, but they want to be fit and healthy, but also have some aesthetic so that, they look muscular or whatever. Are you saying then that if they were doing that as well, then the way you're suggesting to train is a better way of training, even if it's to kind of, to have a certain level of aesthetics, not to stand on stage, but to still have, that kind of nice balanced physique.
Yeah, very much so. If you look at you look at maybe a middleweight boxer, right, or a light heavyweight boxer, like as for a male, right, that's a lean aesthetic, right? You look at a sprinter, 400 meter, 800 meter runner, they're lean and muscular. They don't really do isolation work, right? Bodybuilding is its unique animal, right? But so I would say for the average person, and I'm going to use there's a bunch of natural bodybuilders out there doing amazing things. I would say that bodybuilding programs have developed the way they have largely due to the impact of anabolic steroids and drug use. If that didn't exist, I think the programs would look different. They'd look more like the old school strongman programs, right? With multi-joint lifts and overhead work and less isolation exercise. So I think for the average person who wants to be in shape, be functional, which is kind of a dumb phrase, right? But we know what it means. We'll be able to do things and, have little more muscle mass than average, little less body fat than average. Then I think a full body compound style of training, assuming no injuries, would be the way to go for sure. And that's the way we do it with our clients at Results Fitness.
And Alwyn, do you have, again, I'm going to put you on the spot here because you have a milieu of exercises, and obviously it's based on health history and their fitness goals, et cetera. But, do you have the big three, or I don't know, 3 to 5 exercises that you almost will invariably put into somebody's program for?
That's going to be boring. Yeah. If you think about it, one of my books I wrote a long time ago, it's kind of been refined since then, was The New Rules of Lifting. Me and Lou Schuler wrote it, and it was based on some stuff I learned from Paul Chek and Richard Smith on motor learning theory. That the body doesn't recognize muscles, it recognizes movements. And the movements were squat, lunge, hinge, single leg stance, push, pull, twist, right? So everything kind of falls into those buckets. I've since refined it into squat, which would have parallel stance, split stance, and single leg stance, hinge with the same three stances, and push and pull, horizontal and vertical. That would be it. So within that, my squat pattern of choice would be a goblet squat to start with. If you can't do that, I'd regress you to a body weight squat. If you can do that, a double kettlebell squat. The push pattern would be a push-up, right? My pulling pattern starts with a half kneeling row and becomes more integrated, right? My vertical pull would be a half kneeling pull down and eventually a chin up. So and I'm probably guilty of this myself. The small percentage of exercises that are cool, the link system ones, the unstable ones, they get the most action on Instagram and Facebook for me. And this does help to grow business. But the bulk of what we do at Results Fitness is simple. And I got this phrase from Mark Verstegen from Exos. Simple exercises coached savagely well, right? Squats, push-ups, rows, chins. I hope to outcoach my competition. I hope to have a culture where people train harder in my gym than they might elsewhere. But you can have I've read a program design book that's just behind me. You can have my programs and my program design thing, but you'll be like, where's the sexy ones? Like, where's the twisting cable single leg pull in? And there are some stuff. I'll do some stuff with a sandbag on one shoulder to create this vertical side plank action. I'll do some things like that. But generally, it's very simple stuff. Progressive overload, and progressive overload for most coaches, they think of it as more reps, more weight, or shorter rest period. It can just be better technique. That can be progressive overload. You can get the movement better. But yeah, my big three are very boring, very basic exercises. I don't know if you ever heard of the TRX, Pete, or the rip trainer. I don't know if you've heard of those things, but I use them a lot. Right? I use the TRX as my base, the inverted row as my base row. I like the integration of the core as part of that. That's probably my middle pulling variation. And then
I like you as you did a segment on body weight, and I suppose the way it's described is, or when you hear people talking about it, it's almost so it's this separate thing. But you did a video, I can't remember who it was, but it was similar to what you've just explained there, that it's really just a part of the progression. And if somebody's not doing a correct squat with the bar on the back of their neck, then you want to get them to do that correct squat first, just without anything on a body weight, using their pure body weight. And then once they're ready, that evolves into something else, which I thought was a nicer way of looking at it.
It's a strange artificial divide that we've had that, like this, it's a body weight, I believe in body weight training only. Like, how does the body know? Like, how does it know? Like, if I can do 10 chin-ups and then I go out and I eat a bunch of, fast food with salt on it and I'm holding 3 pounds of water or 4 pounds of water and I do the chin-up again, isn't that the same as adding weight? Right? External load. Like, how does the body doesn't know. It just knows, it knows mechanical tension, muscular damage, and metabolic stress. It doesn't know that I'm doing this with a cable, a band, or my body weight. That's always been, there can be a place where I'm like, this client can't do a dumbbell chest press. Can they do a push-up on the floor? No. Then I put the push-up on an incline, or I keep bringing it up. So I'm unloading them, but the movement is the same. Now, we could understand taking weight off on the dumbbells, but I could just reposition the body. Now, similarly, there's a point where I get someone to the floor. You're getting over 10 reps in push-ups, probably not strength anymore, starting to get into endurance. So maybe I elevate the feet, or I put a weighted vest on you, or chains or something. But at some point, that just becomes impractical. And maybe I need to do dumbbell pressing. Like, I need to get heavy load on there, So I think that's the it is a weird divide. Like, I've never understood it, but it's there. Like, body weight. Like, I think Mike Boyle told me once that he worked with Mickey Ward, the boxer, and he goes, I don't like doing the weights. He goes, no problem. He's got him doing push-ups and dips and chin-ups with weighted vests on, right? Sometimes you meet the client where they are, right?
How much strength is enough?
See, that's how I can distract my staff for an hour by asking a question like that. Like, how strong is strong enough? I'd have to ask for what, right? Like, I'm aware of this, that there's never been an Olympic judo gold medal who can't bench press 1.5 times their body weight. And that doesn't mean that doing that will allow you to win an Olympic judo medal, but there's a level of strength required to compete at that sport. I have a couple of athletes that I've worked with, and you reach a point where getting stronger will always be beneficial. The question I like to change it is not as how strong is strong enough, is will the time spent pursuing this strength translate to getting us closer to our goal or improve performance on the field, right? Because everything that you do, I always say training is like packing for a trip. You can't take everything, right? You can't take everything. So something has to be left out. So if I've got I've got a female, she's an American Ninja Warrior, Tiana Weberly. She's an absolute rock star athlete. She's 120 pounds. And she can do sets of 3 pull-ups on rings with an 80-pound dumbbell. She's super strong. I would like to see 100 pounds just for the heck of it, right? The time taken to pursue that, I don't think will translate to the sport whatsoever. Like, I think she could be stronger, but compared to her competition, I don't think anybody's stronger than her there. So we have to work on explosiveness, conditioning, other things. So I always flip it back as how conditioned is conditioned enough, right? Like if Usain Bolt has to run a 200 meters, that's his longest distance, getting him able to run a 300, waste of training time, right? He's conditioned enough, and we focus on speed. So I'd like to say a number, that this exact number is the key, but I always switch it to would the investment in pursuing more strength, for example, the investment in pursuing more strength in terms of training time translate to getting our goal? Would getting your 70-year-old golf client who can squat 95 pounds beautifully, getting him up to 135 pounds translate to anything on the golf course or his life? Maybe not. And so is pursuing this worth it,
Well, and then I think you've also got the risk to reward equation, where you just mentioned a 70-year-old plus golfer. You want them strong, but at some point, you start flirting with 4 to 6 reps on a 75-year-old dude or female, and it makes you kind of like, as a strength coach, and especially as a physical therapist, because I see the back end of all this stuff. I see guys that are trying to deadlift 550 pounds, and they're 42 years old. They're not competing in anything anymore. They just think it's really cool. And I'm like, wait a minute, you were doing 500 pounds and that wasn't enough. They wanted to hit that 550. And so at some point, you also got to look at risk to reward and where you're at on that equation.
I think that's probably as good an answer as to keep pursuing it safely. As long as it doesn't detract from other qualities. There's a risk of putting load on the body at some point. I'd say the risk of being weak and sitting on the couch is higher, right? Getting weak and deconditioned is a higher risk thing. But I think for an athlete, it's just like would getting them stronger translate to something. For a 50-year-old, 60-year-old, just general person. I'm 50 now, so saying 50, 60, like the same. That's like 40, 50. I'll switch that to I don't want to feel. I want to be really strong, really conditioned. I don't want to feel sore or my life to be worse as a result of my workouts, right? So I'm only prepared to put so much load on before I'm like, man. When I was, when you're younger, man, I say this at seminars. Coaches and trainers are not normal. I'll say to a room of trainers, remember that leg workout you did? Couldn't even go to the toilet the next day? Couldn't get down the stairs? And the room's all smiling, like, yeah, that was great. I'm like, normal people don't like to feel like that. Trainers are like, can't even move today. Hashtag beast mode. Right? We're not supposed to feel like that. So I think the pursuit of strength, more speed, more conditioning, more mobility, it is all good, but there's a cost to it, and the cost could just be socially. I'm not prepared to do that. Like I'm not prepared. Like I know how to get to that goal, and I'm just the costs on the wear and tear and the me living in the gym and stuff. I might not be prepared to do that. With an athlete, it's if we pursue this, we're probably losing another quality, right? We don't have unlimited training time. As somebody asked me on a podcast last week, he goes, right, once and for all, which is better, full body routines or split routines? I'm like, how many days do you have to train? 1, full body, only answer. You can only do 1, right? 2, it's probably still that, right? It's only when you have multiple times can you start to explore other options. So I think if you've got a limited training time, as we all do, certain activities bump up in the hierarchy, and strength to me is always number 1. But the pursuit of more strength means not pursuing something else that may be needed, right? That golfer may need something else. He doesn't need to get stronger, huh?
So on that, there's a few things that I've picked up on. You mentioned like packing your suitcase and also how many days have you got available to train. So if we're looking at the regular person, we're not talking of an athlete, and sort of leaning back to Pete's conversation in terms of the key exercises that you like to do. From a programming perspective, if you look at the typical person in a week with around about 3 to 4 hours where they can train, how would you prioritize this type of training during that period? You mentioned strength would be where you would start, but are there any other things that would be essential that you'd want to get in if you only had that type of time available?
So I would say that when I say strength training, we're going to have strength on one column and aerobics completely the other side of the continuum, right? I'm probably here, right, where we're not doing 1 rep max all the time, where we're doing weight training, but we're using short rest periods, we're pairing exercises. A practical workout at Results Fitness will be a warm-up that it has a lot of range of motion work in. We call it RAMP, range of motion, activation, and movement prep. The reason for that is if I said to people, did you warm up? They're like, yeah, I walked here, right? Like I jogged over, right? So I'm like, your joints aren't prepared, right? So we do that, and that maybe take 8 to 10 minutes. Then I'll do direct core work, trunk stabilization. Then there's always a power component with a medicine ball throw, kettlebell swing, something there. Then strength training. The way we set up the strength training, there's going to be a metabolic component to it because we move fairly quickly through it. It's not cardio, but we're moving fairly quickly through it. So that's how I'd set it up. And honestly, for most people, if you're at 3 hours a week, I'll just do that. I won't add any additional work to that. When you get beyond that, and this is again how strong is strong enough. When I'm getting to 4 hours a week, would an extra session like that add much? It will, but there's also, you start to get into a cost of recovery with it. And I was talking to one of my coaches this morning. I like full body training, but if you have to do back-to-back days, that can be rough, right? Because you've squatted on a Monday, like you've done goblet squats on a Monday, and then you got to do your next workout would have been a Wednesday, and it had maybe hinges or step-ups or something. You'll be feeling all right by Wednesday. You got to hit it Tuesday before you go out of town. That can be rough. So maybe a split routine would work there. So what I'm getting from 3 to 4, often the fourth one is, and Pete does a lot of that. I used to call it metabolic acceleration training. Now I'm using the term loaded cardio. So if we have strength on one side and aerobics on the other, we have interval training as closer to strength, but you would have things like sled pushes. I mean, if I ask you which is more cardiovascular, a 1 rep max squat or a 5K, we know the answer. But a 1 rep max squat, more cardiovascular is at 5 reps, right? It's moving that way. A set of 10 lunges. And then you're like, a set of 20 lunges or 20 steps on a hill sprint, right? They start to blend. So there's this zone in between where I have like strength training, what we call loaded cardio, interval training, and then aerobic training, and we go this way, right? So the first thing would be strength, then it would be loaded cardio, which could look like a circuit of farmers carries, sled pushes, barrel ropes, things like that, where it's loaded, but you could go for a while. You could go a couple of minutes with it. You're not going to finish, and you're not going to be reaching failure in 30, 40 seconds, right? So that would be something I'd add, because that still gives me a little resistance, gives me some good cardio. But with some of these things, like sled push in particular, and the battle ropes, there's no eccentric component, so you don't really get sore, right? So this can be an added session. And then you get right up to, if I was working on The Biggest Loser and I get 6 hours a day, there'd be a lot of this low level cardio, right? Just it's easy to recover from. It doesn't do an awful lot, I don't think, right? I mean, it does, but per unit time, it's not. I wrote this article years ago, The Hierarchy of Fat Loss, and people missed that number 1 and 2 on my hierarchy were nutrition, right? So the third thing was training. Like, nutrition is the most important, but within training, I thought strength training first, interval training second, and aerobic training last. It doesn't mean that aerobic training didn't work. It's just, if I've only got an hour, it's only strength training. In fact, if I only got an hour, it would be meal prep and nutrition coaching, right? If I got an extra hour, it would be strength training. And as I have more time, then more strength training is hard to recover from. So I moved down this hierarchy. I'm at the point now, I talked with Robert Yang, and I did a podcast recently with Robert Yang, Don Saladino, and Ali Gilbert, that I actually don't prescribe cardio for body comp clients if they can give me 10,000 steps a day of daily activity. Like that, I don't feel that aerobic state for body comp, like we can have reasons for programming it, for body comp does anything other than burn calories. So I can tell, I was in New York for this weekend, and you can see on your phone how many steps you're doing. I was doing 20,000 steps a day. Yesterday, I was on the computer. I did 1,000 steps yesterday. I didn't move at all yesterday. I just was sat on the computer, right? That guy, if that's your life, you might need to be hitting the treadmill a little bit more often, right? You might need to get to the gym. Someone who's really active, I wouldn't program that at all. It just would be, what use would be adding 20 minutes on the treadmill twice a week to that person, right? So that my long way of saying it is, everything starts with these complete workouts that we call it strength training, but it's maybe more towards that. Fourth workout would be loaded cardio. If you did an hour, another hour, maybe interval training, and then like, I'm not against people going for I have people saying, like, well, what if you should go for a walk every day? I'm like, I have clients that genuinely do not have that time in their schedule that they can go for a walk. Like, they work hard, they're high-level medical executives, they work really hard, they have a long commute, they've got an hour to train. I'm not having that guy walking around the block, right? We're going to get dense and intense. We're going to work it, right? That's how I approach it. So, and if you get a 5K competitive runner, my answer is going to be different. But for the general pop and maybe the people that the listeners to this podcast, work with, that would be my approach.
One of the, I don't know, were you going to jump in there, Pete? Or?
No, I love it. And
No.
the other thing I think about the metabolic response stuff is, again, I live up in Aspen. I train a very unique demographic, and they do tons of long, slow duration cardio, which, again, way better than sitting on your tush on the couch. But I ask these people to move with some level of speed and intensity, and they look at me like I'm an alien. And, as far as I'm concerned, it's that ability for the heart rate to go from a baseline, a resting, 90, 100 beats a minute, up to 150, 160, 170, 180. And that efficiency in the heart and the lungs and that cardiorespiratory system, I think, is huge. You don't see people that are dying or diseased that can get that variability of their heart rate from a low baseline up to 170, 180, 190. And I think that's something that we kind of lose sight on. It's all about body transformation, but you don't want to die when you're shoveling the snow out on the garage, outside your garage for the first time in the winter, because your heart can't respond to that stress.
I think also, if we look at endurance sports, right, where we've got this idea from, this idea of endurance training is built around to go longer, right? But these things are still a race. it still has a speed component to it. It still has a power component to it. I've tested recently. I was doing just heart rate training, and I was doing it at the same speed, and I did it for a month on a treadmill. I did 3 workouts a week, and I used the incline to do the cardio training. So I hit the heart rate zones, right, and recover. Now, I use this as an example because I can show you these heart rates, and you wouldn't know what I did, right? You just see this was a cardio workout of interval training. But I can tell you that the lack of speed, the speed goes away fast, right? Like I ran with my wife in Central Park in New York, and my heart rate was just cruising. But I was like, my legs felt heavy. You know that feeling? Like I couldn't go right now. Right. Like I'll see it sometimes with an athlete that they'll send me their online coaching has become a thing after the lockdown. I've always done what I call remote coaching, where I'm not at every session. Sometimes the athlete goes to the track or runs and sends me their heart rate data or their times, and I break it down. And I've had athletes and they sent me, maybe they're running 400s in 90 seconds, right? They're running 400 meters and they have to do repeats. And they'll send me, they're like, I couldn't get the times, coach. I couldn't hit the times. And then they send me their heart rate, and their heart rate is low. Like they're not challenged cardiovascularly, right? So now, if you're a dumb coach, you'll be like, you just didn't try, right? But I'm hopefully slightly smarter than that. I'm like, this kid's just shot. Their legs are tired. The legs are tired. So the legs are like, we've got nothing left. And the cardio system's like, we got you. We're not even challenged yet. But the way I explain it is if you're in great cardio shape and you're about to run a 5K and I just come along and bam, leg kick you, it doesn't matter. Your cardio is useless, right? Because it's the unit, right? This ability for the heart and lungs to plod along, like the muscles are still involved, the bones and the ligaments are all still involved, and the tendons. I want the whole system to be able to be pliable, right, and be springy. So there's a place for intervals just to get the average. You work at an intensity you couldn't hold. That's the idea, and then you recover. But you work at a pace maybe you couldn't hold. It's not just the cardio. It's training that speed, getting that speed component, getting that elasticity. So it's there's a place for everything. If we're only looking at body comp, the only thing that matters really is a caloric deficit and making some type of stimulus so that the body doesn't lose muscle mass. So I always read it as a negative caloric deficit, positive nitrogen balance, high protein, and some type of anabolic signal, which means resistance training. You do that, you can get body comp done. So aerobic, 100 calories of aerobic work or interval training, or not eating 100 calories or burning them sleeping, they're all the same. Just per unit of time, it's different, right? Unit of time, I'll burn it faster with intervals or weight training, right? And that's the key. The argument's always as to what's the best form of training. It starts with how much time do I have? I don't get that. I don't get unlimited time, right? So I have to start back there. Like like if I was training Pete for a taekwondo match, I don't replicate what he does in practice. I will give him what he can't get from practice, right? Like there's no sense in doing intervals on the pads. We do that in class, right? I'll be doing the stuff you won't get from that. Right, because I don't get all the time. I'll get him for 2-3 hours, and I've got to find the difference makers, right? So I think the difference in a research, like I've seen a thing that burning 100 calories or not eating it, or it made no difference in fat loss. Who are these people who needed to find that out, right? And I've seen ones that 300 calories of aerobic training is the same as 300 calories from interval training, but the caveat is the interval training took 10 minutes. Less than the aerobic training. So for a coach, there's differences. For a coach, there's advantages, right? So for a researcher, there perhaps isn't, right? Because they're just looking at data. They're not working with people. Yeah, you do the heart rate zone and the long, slow cardio like you're seeing out in Colorado. Yeah, that's great, but the car is coming. Can you get off the street quickly, right? You don't have that elasticity to move, right? Or the Yeti's coming down the hill.
Alan, can you tell that? When I look at my heart rate, this is one of the things I'm always a bit confused on. Sometimes I'll look at the different zones that I'm working out in, and sometimes I feel okay, But yeah, I'm doing a similar workout, but I'm in a totally different zone. And I'm thinking, well, what is that? Is that because I'm tired from just generally tired? Or is it, as you say, for example, I've worked out my legs and my legs have not recovered, so I'm not able to put the effort in. If I listen to what you were talking about when you look at some of your athletes and look at their heart rate zones, how do you tell the difference from whether they've just not, I suppose, generally recovered, or whether it's more to do with like more of a muscular thing, or are they one of the same things?
I don't know if I could isolate that, Matthew. When they give me their time and their heart rates, I can see how fast they've worked and how hard or easy it was. In your example, you might just got in better shape that day, so it's not as hard to do the same work, right? It's like there's a lot of coaches out there right now, because heart rate technology became commonplace. They use it to kind of observe what happened, right? Where I'll use it to drive what I want to happen. I'll want you to work in certain zones. I'll push you to, I want here. But if I had you do a fixed circuit, right, or a fixed distance, you should either get faster at it if I use a fixed distance, or if I have you run at the same pace for a fixed time, over time that heart rate should come down because it's less demanding for you. But acutely, you're like, man, I just can't hit these times. I can't hit this pace. It feels harder than my heart rate suggests it is. Right? My heart rate says I'm at 70%. I can't go any faster with my legs. That's a sign that you need recovery. So you tend to not see it as much with general fitness people, because their lives are, this sounds horrible, their lives are largely the same. With an athlete who has a game, that game can be radically different. Right? You could watch a soccer game and the goalkeeper doesn't move. He has nothing to do all day. He can lift that day. He can circuit train tomorrow, but the forward could be, or the defenders could be working so hard that they need a day off. Right, which is why some heart rate variability stuff can be really applicable for athletes, that you can see things before you're seeing it. With general fitness people, you tend not to see that too much. But if there's a schedule change or a sick child, or you're up late at night, then it's possible that I'm like, that 30-minute run where you'd normally get a 5K, you just can't get it done, and it can be like physiologically the heart rate is not showing that you're stressed. But the body's just like, it's like I said, the most acute example is if I just kick you in the leg, right? That the cardio, you didn't get worse at cardio, right? You didn't lower your cardiovascular response. You just had something where that muscle can't work at its optimal thing. So could I tell it from heart rate alone? Unlikely. From heart rate and speed data and a training diary, probably.
Yeah,
and I think, that's why some of this heart rate variability stuff is pretty interesting to me. There's so many variables. You start looking at nutrition, you start looking at sleep, you start looking at cortisol levels, whether you're, who knows, going through a breakup in your relationship, you've got stress at work. There's so many factors that play into your performance. And, that's why athletics are so cool, because when it's game day, everybody's dealing with different variables, and you got to, some people like Michael Jordan or whoever can override a lot of that stuff, and other people, it's just you got to pay attention to it.
Yeah, I've seen some stuff with it, and I didn't get a lot out of heart rate variability myself. My schedule remained, it said take a day off when I was planning to, right? I didn't get a lot, but I've seen it with athletes whose day-to-day practices could be very different, or games can be very different. There's something there. The argument against it, I've heard some guys say, I've felt terrible, and then I've had a great workout, so I don't know. I'm like, well, the heart rate variability would have told you were good to go, right? It would have said your body's ready. So it's I think we sometimes have a danger of, because of there's a great book, Unplugged, by Andy Galpin, who's a exercise physiologist at CSU Fullerton. And he talks about we have to use the technology to augment what we're already doing, but don't let it replace the coach, right? Don't let it replace, like, I mean, if I had, like, Pete was about to fight tonight and I got his heart rate variability and he says it's terrible, should I share that with him? Like, I don't think that's a tremendous coaching tool, right? Feel like he's a little flat. Like, I know at Manchester United, they did something with HRV and the Omega Wave, which looked at brain activity, a whole bunch of other things. You just come in and did this check, and then you went and got changed, and then you went to your iPad to get your workout, and it would adjust it in real time. It'd cut your volume, or you'd have a mobility session. So you never, like, if I come in with a client and they're like, I'm like, just mobility today, they may be mad, right? So there's the reality of coaching, and there's the business of running a training business that, like, I want to have all the technology at my disposal, but it still has to go through the eyes and ears of the coach and the client, right?
Yeah, one of the things that you've mentioned, Alan, I believe this is your quote, is that good trainers design programs good trainers design workouts and great trainers design programs. And in terms of some of the stuff we've been talking about here, my guess is that is part of developing a program over a longer period of time. When you're looking to create programs for people, what are some of the key factors do you take into consideration? Like we've kind of covered heart rate, and you've mentioned that, you know, maybe that can or cannot play a part, but are there any other things that you use that are almost like your fundamentals to develop a great longer term program for your clients?
So I actually use we start with your goals, right? So if you can do 1 push-up and you want to do 10 push-ups in 10 weeks, I'm aware I got to develop about 1 a week. What will happen with that is it's kind of like chin-ups. Chin-ups might take you 12 weeks to get somebody to do 1, but by week 13 they can do sets of 3, right? Because once you can do 1, you can train it. So it's not going to be a linear process, but it's really, where do we want to go? Where are we now? And how long do we have? Right? Like, it's like designing a road trip. Like, where are we? Where are we going to go? And then I have this idea, right? Like if I know where we are and I understand progressive overload, I know what to do, right? Then I use the functional movement screen, which confuses a lot of people when they do it. I write my program first, and then I look at your movement screen and ask, does it suggest I take anything out because you have a limitation? Or does it suggest I add something to improve something that's a little deficient, right? I don't use it to direct my programming, right? I use it to be like, is there something in this screen that suggests that you shouldn't be doing overhead pressing, for example, until we improve thoracic mobility? So I train, it will be depending on your goal, and I kind of do a needs analysis to see what you need. And if I have a gym and a space to have you do conditioning, we can get it done, right? But it's really that the whole idea of any assessment or screen is just to establish a baseline of where we're at, right? Like, you know, I want to be able to do 20 push-ups. And how many can you do now? 19. All right, I can get that pretty soon, right? I want to be able to do 50 push-ups. How many can you do? None. I have 2 rotator cuff tears. That's going to be a slightly different challenge, right? But it's where do we start, and what is my process is like a sort of needs analysis, looking at how you move in the functional movement screen. Again, it's based on those movement patterns I talked about: squat, hinge, lunge, single leg stance. So I can assess your movement quality and say, like, you know, you're not, this athlete can't squat well enough yet, as you touched on, Matthew, that it can't squat well enough yet for me to load them, right? You're not cleared to load this pattern, right? But we can work to improve the pattern. We can do assisted work. Can we do that by just doing a regressed version of the pattern? Perhaps. Or do I need to go further, as Pete touched on, and isolate the limiting factor and work on that? So really that's the Alwyn Cosgrove Program Design 101 model. Where are we going? Where do we start? How long have we got, right?
That time thing, though, I've seen you mention that in a few of your videos, and I think that's a really important part, because I think I've interviewed a lot of people and asking similar types of questions, but the time bit is one that's never really come up. And when you gave that example of, have you got 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours, when you start thinking it in that way, it does really change the approach. I don't know whether that's something you use, Pete, or whether I've just sort of never thought of it that way, but it was a real sort of a big thing.
I think everybody does it. I just maybe verbalize that where some people don't, right? Like, if my goal is to improve push-ups and I can give Pete 5 minutes a week, we're probably not doing squats, right? Like, we're probably building it around that, right?
Well, most people doesn't have the time, though. I guess that's the thing. That's their challenge. And then they're trying to do something thinking they've got more time maybe than what they have.
Yeah, I've never had anybody show up at the gym and just say, man, I got nothing to do. Could you fill my day with workout stuff?
It is amazing, though, as you learn more as a coach, and then certainly your athletes. I mean, ideally, we want our clients to also assume some of the knowledge base that we have and be able to, they're on vacation in Mexico or something, and we want them to be able to structure their own workouts. But what amazes me is I always invariably say, I don't have enough time to train today. I don't even know where to start. And then I get started, and sometimes that time pressure, like I got 30 minutes. I mean, in 30 minutes, Alwyn, you know this, you can get a lot done. I mean, you fast track your mobility, your movement prep, low level agility. This next thing you know, you're into some kind of metabolic / strength training circuit. And for me at 52 now, I do Bulgarian squats and a pull-up and a sled push in 3 rounds of that. And I'm like, I'm pretty much good.
What do we miss? What exercise, what body part did we miss with that? Right? Like, we had everything, right? You get everything there, right? So it's, I mean, I think if I'm like, your rest periods today are 30 seconds, Pete, choose a weight that allows us to go again. Then you can adjust, and we can keep it like I got this phrase from Dwayne Carlisle, like dense and intense. Right, we just got to work. Like, we're gonna work really as hard as we can. Could you squat heavier if I gave you 5-minute rest periods? Absolutely. We don't get that luxury today. 30-second rest periods, right? So we're going to adjust like accordingly. And then I think you're right. You pick the big bang exercises, like split squats and pull-ups are like. I would have done tricep press downs and arm crawls myself. That's like masochistic, right? Like, you pick the hardest two, right? Like, no one is like, I need more split squats in my life, or like I could do more chin-ups. But that with the sled push, that you pick probably the three big bang hardest exercises there is. That's a mean workout. But you're picking that on purpose. They're easier choices, but you wouldn't get the same result out of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know if you guys struggle with this, but like I said, I'm now in my 50s and I'm kind of beat up. I know Alwyn we were both high level martial artists and competed, and I've got a lot of joint pain. And Matthew, I don't know as much about your background, but like, what are some of the things that you do to mentally prepare? You've had a long work day, you need to get something in. Like, is there any rituals or patterns or philosophy that goes through your head to stay upbeat and get your workouts in and stay positive?
I've never regretted training. I've always regretted missing training. And so my other thing is, there's no such thing as a half a workout, only a half-ass workout. So like, if I just did my mobility, right? And we used to do this when we were training for Taekwondo. You can quit at any time, right? You can blow off a session at any time after you show up. Not on the couch. You have to come and warm up. And if you're like, man, I feel ill, I'm not doing it today, then that's fine. You can you're not well, you can go home. But you make the decision not when the movie came on and you're on the couch, right? So I'm like, let me do my ramp, and I'll do ramp and core. And I'll tell you, man, just once you get through those two, you're like, all right, I'll do 10 more minutes. I'll just do some swings, do some kettlebell swings, and I'll just do the circuit. Right? And then you've done a 45-minute workout. So I think part of it is also that idea, like, we try to get everyone in and out of the gym at Results Fitness in under 60 minutes. So if you're just setting the pace, you can get some of this stuff done in like a short period of time. But mine is, I've had like cancer twice. So like, I don't take health for granted. Neither does anybody. But I'm just like, listen, I have to do something, right? I'll get up early and do something if I'm flying out early. Like I've never regretted training. I have regretted missing workouts, right? So that's one of my other quotes is, while I really regret that workout, said no one ever.
Have you since you had the cancer, have you changed anything in your life, whether it's, what you eat, how you train, your philosophies on life that have sort of helped you through that? Like, just getting over that is pretty impressive in itself. But, is there any things that you've learned through that journey?
And that it's funny is that there's this search for a why when you get diagnosed, right? Like you're like, oh man, sometimes it's just a genetic lottery, right? Like I have this theory that on a scale of 0 to 10, everyone has a risk of getting cancer. If somebody has 1 and they smoke and go out in the sun without sunscreen and they drink a bunch of alcohol and they do everything wrong and they end up at a 9. And then you could have someone like, I think it was Christopher Reeve's wife who got lung cancer, had never smoked in her life. Then maybe she's genetically a 9 and did one thing that, was stayed out late and it tipped her over. So I never had anything nutritional or exercise wise. I'm aware of, I want to get an 8 out of 10 on everything, my sleep, my hydration, my nutrition right now. I'm just aware of it, that this is a whole system. Like, could cancer be caused by stress? Maybe. Could it be caused by poor sleep? Could poor sleep be caused by not having dark enough curtains in your room? Like, I don't know. Philosophy wise is probably been the biggest. And I got this from Lance Armstrong is, after cancer, there's no bad days, man. There's only good days and great days. And that's just kind of my sort of, that's my life philosophy stolen from Lance, is that, one time the idea of being stuck in traffic once more was a dream, right? And you're sitting in a hospital bed at UCLA wondering if you're ever going to get out. And now you're stuck in traffic. You're like, you remember those days where you were just in that room? Like, not to get all like, down and depressed with everybody, but there's, just like, man, this is interesting. Where's everybody going? Right? just you can look at things any way you want, right? Like you can see obstacles and you can see opportunities. But that's that life in terms of life stuff. It was that Lance line, only good days and great days. That's one of the core values at Results Fitness. For all our team members, there's only good days and great days.
So just a couple of questions before we wrap up. But before that, like, if anyone wants to find out more about you, any programs, your facilities, where can people find out a bit more about you, Adam?
I have a membership. Every DVD or course I've ever taught live is recorded and up in my membership website, resultsfitnessinnercircle.com. So I'd love for you guys to check that out. And then probably the easiest way to reach me is I'm pretty active on Instagram. It's just my name, Alwyn Cosgrove. So you can follow me over there, and I throw up all the 1% work exercises that we talked about earlier. I throw all them up there. They're on the boring step ups and push ups. They don't get a lot of love on Instagram, so you'll see the extreme stuff. But I try to do something over there every day, and I try my best to answer any messages I get. Sometimes I get a lot, but I try my best to answer them all.
Mm. And so just before we wrap up then, Alan, one of the things Pete and I chatted about before this is the mental health part. And you've obviously been through a hell of a journey and had to develop that and develop a different outlook on your life. Is there any, I suppose, for people who are probably not quite there and things don't look as rosy as what they probably should do if they've been through a similar journey to yourself, have you found any things or any habits or meditation or yoga or anything like that you found has helped you sort of take a step back and be able to sort of appreciate what's going on and I suppose minimize some of these things that probably seem as though the world is ending, but probably isn't actually?
Well, I think touching on the mental health thing, I think as a profession, we've done a poor job of that. I believe if I trained someone and I was training them 3 times a week and we didn't lose any body fat, we didn't get any stronger, we didn't improve any fitness, which would be real impossible to do, by the way, if we were training consistently, that process is so beneficial for mental health. And I think if our profession was looked at in that way, we would have been essential during this lockdown. Instead, we were thought of as abs and butts and arms and not important. And we were just these people all sweating all over. I had a friend saying, yeah, I understand my gym's closed and people all sweating all over each other. I'm like, what do you think goes on? That's not what happens, right? If we were considered as we actually make people robust, like if you're in Florida and the hurricane is coming, they tell you to get your building ready, right? If we knew this was coming, you'd get your building ready, right? And you'd get this building ready. And I think that's the one thing that as a profession, we could have done a much better job at, and we have to do that going forward. It's not about body comp or VO2 max or 1 rep max. It's about the mental health aspects of intentional exercise can make a huge difference to people. My honest thing, and I don't want to give this impression I'm just this, walking around smiling all the time, right? But there's the attitude of gratitude, right? That there's a poem that I put in my transplant day was June 13th, and I post this every year on social media, and it's what it feels like to be reborn, right? When you walk out after a bone marrow and stem cell transplant, and the smells and the things are so just suddenly aware that you were always there and you didn't take notice of. But I think that no matter how like I remember going to see my dad had gotten really ill a few years ago and taken to the hospital, and then I was flying back here, and then you're just like, one day it's the last day to you see him, right? No matter, for all of us, it's one day is the last day, and you're just kind of sitting depressed on the airport, and then you're like, all right, what's good about this, right? What can I be thankful for? I'm thankful that I was able to go and see him. I'm thankful that my financial situation and my work situation allows me to leave to go and see him. I'm now about to get on a plane and sit and watch a movie and just relax. And I've got 8 hours. I can maybe take a nap and drink 5 beers, and I'll land back in LA. And that's pretty cool. You do nothing all day and just drink beers. That's not horrible. Right? And you just like, it's just, you can find the good. You can find the good in it, right? And sometimes it's hidden, man, but it's there. Right, and if you start with that attitude, that there's something to be thankful for, and it could be that, man, another day I'm alive, right? Like I'm just made it. And with some of the stuff on the lockdown, man, this is a Jim Rohn line. No matter how dark the winter has been, there has never in the history been a double winter. This has just been a long one, right? This has just been long. But spring will come. Right, it just you've just got to have that if you operate only good days and great days, and you operate from a position of thankfulness, you see like you've heard that 2 shoe salesmen get sent to a territory in a village in the middle of a jungle in this little island, and they both arrive in this little village after this long flight. And they get there and they look around the village, and one shoe salesman looks around and he calls his boss and says, "Boss, this is a waste of time. No one here even wears shoes." And the second guy calls his boss back and goes, "Boss, send me everything you've got. You're not going to believe it. No one here even wears shoes." The 2 people see the same thing, and one person sees the obstacle and one person sees the opportunity. And it's just their operating system that sees it differently. But you can train that, just like you can train anything else. Like when I caught myself saying something negative, I used to have a wristband, and I would snap it and I'd say out loud, "Cancel." And it's not, you can't be like you go out in the garden and there's weeds and you're like, look at these weeds. You're like, wait a minute, cancel. There's no weeds here. That's being a crazy person. But you can say, like, how do I get rid of these weeds? Right? Like, I can't afford that course. What do I have to do to afford this course? Right? You can reframe it so it's not negative. And eventually, when you keep hurting your wrist when you got welts on it, your brain starts to be programmed differently. You can program to see the opportunity and not the obstacle. You can program to see the good in it. Right? You can retrain your brain. Right? You can retrain like that. At one point, and when Pete was 9, if you attacked him, he would freeze. Now he'll hook kick you in the mouth, right? That's a trained response, right? But you can train to think differently, right? So it's I'd say that my mental health tip is there's good in it, You just got to look for it.
Fantastic. Well, Mr. Alwyn Cosgrove, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a real pleasure, and hopefully we can find some time to do a part 2 maybe. Still had a lot of questions we didn't get time to cover, so maybe next time.
That's because I blabber on too much. Cheers, guys. Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.